questions?
I guess we'll see. Hello, everyone. I am Alex. I'm one of the owners of Hamilton Family Doulas, and I am here with Sequoia, who is a midwife in Hamilton. And we are going to chat today a little bit more about home birth, and how we might know what's right for you, what it can look like, safety, all that kind of stuff. So definitely, anyone has questions, you can feel free to submit them to us. But otherwise, we're just going to kind of chat a little bit about this. So hi, Sequoia.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you for joining. It's always nice to, as much as from the doula perspective, I've attended a number of home births and can talk a little bit about it. It's nice to also talk to the experts, the people who are in charge of running the smoothness of the home birth and dealing with all of the medical side, and hear a little bit more from you, as you would have even much more home birth experience than I do as a midwife. So yeah, I guess maybe I can start and just talk a little bit. One of the things I often get asked by clients as they're considering where they might want to birth is just, not just about safety of home birth, but like, what does that really look like? And I always say one of the really cool things about having a midwife is that as long as medically everything is going well, home birth always remains an option. You can register at the hospital, you can, but you can be laboring at home with your midwife and just decide like, oh yeah, now I see why people do this, and I kind of just want to stay here and do it. And there is something really neat, I find, and almost magical sometimes about giving birth in your own space, in your own home. Sometimes it's also a little bit MacGyver-y because not everyone's house is set up for where you can have a birth pool. And I've definitely attended more, kitchen births at home births and things, and hallway births and
Bathroom births.
yeah, exactly. In the hospital, but then you're in your own home, you're in your own space. So yeah, Sequoia, maybe you can let us know a little bit about, from your perspective as a midwife, home birth and some of your experiences.
Yeah, I mean, in general, where you feel the safest is where you're going to have the safest birth. So if you feel like you're going to be in a safe environment in your own home and that feels right to you, then home birth is the perfect place. If you feel safest in the hospital, then that's the safest place for you to have your baby. But we know that home birth in Ontario and Canada specifically is very safe because we have really well-trained midwives that come with basically all of the equipment of a level 1 hospital to your house. So that includes things for managing a postpartum hemorrhage, should you have one. We have intubation equipment for the newborn, resuscitation equipment, including oxygen for the mom and baby. All of those kinds of things that you would expect in a hospital, we have those and we bring them to your house. So we have bags and bags of gear that we end up setting up at your house, which makes the access to that equipment really safe. The other thing is that here we're very lucky to have really good relationships with paramedics, emergency services, so that if something does go wrong, and I would say that midwives in general are quite conservative in the sense that we can see kind of things happening when something is potentially going to go wrong or not ideal, we would recommend a transport into the hospital sooner rather than later. And because we have those great relationships with the paramedics and we're close to hospitals, that makes it that much easier and that much safer.
Yeah. I think sometimes people don't always understand what all of that looks like. And I wonder if some of that is how much we get of everything that we understand about the world from America. I know from training doulas in America, like, it's very, very, as much as it's province to province here, it can just be so different from state to state. There are places where home birth is illegal and the people who are doing home birth are unfortunately like kind of operating outside of the law. And then you have scenarios where people are just like dropped at the front of hospitals and told not to say they were doing a home birth with midwives. And so sometimes when I'm talking to people about a potential home birth, they're coming in with that information and that mindset, and to understand that we have a much more collaborative approach with our midwives here, and that the midwives also are very much regulated, very much, trained in dealing with, normal physiological birth, but also the places where issues can come up and the steps that need to be taken, and also then have those good relationships so that they can be, even if a transfer of care in the hospital is needed, they can be that connection of like, here is everything that has happened, let me catch you up to date, as opposed to somebody's just abandoned on the front lawn of the hospital, what's going on here kind of scenario.
Yeah, it's really too bad that a lot of the stuff that we see is based in the US, because a lot of the stuff you see on TV is just not at all what birth looks like whatsoever, as we know. But yeah, we have privileges at the hospitals here in Hamilton, particularly, or at least I do. So, when we're transporting into the hospital, I'm going to call the OB on the way and say, here's the scenario. And I'm not going to leave your side the entire time. Just because we would transport into the hospital doesn't mean there would be a transfer of care necessarily either. It just might mean that, we're going in for an epidural, or maybe we need oxytocin because your labor has stalled out a little bit. Those are actually the most common reasons that we transfer into the hospital, not for those major emergencies that it's like bells and whistles, like Grey's Anatomy crazy stuff happening. It's actually just because people need pain relief or their labor has slowed down, and you just need a little bit of extra help. So the most common kind of reasons are kind of those boring reasons, and definitely not what you would see on TV for sure.
Yeah. So more often than not, if there is a transfer in, you're saying it's honestly for very kind of mild and mundane things, as opposed to any kind of true emergency.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so it's, kind of a more relaxed transport into the hospital. You potentially can even take your own car, depending on the scenario, those kinds of things.
Yeah. I'm always interested in, kind of from your perspective, what are you normally hearing from clients are the main reasons that they're considering home birth? Like what are some of the things, or afterwards when you're supporting clients who've had home births, what are the things that they talk about as being some of those big benefits, or the things they loved most about their birth when they were able to have a home birth?
The thing that people love the most, and the thing that I love the most too, is just tucking people into bed when it's all over. You didn't have to go anywhere. You didn't have to find additional childcare. Most of the time, if their second baby, their toddler is sleeping through the whole thing the majority of the time, or watching a movie downstairs. You have your access to your own food, your own bathtub. And yeah, truthfully, you just kind of get tucked in, don't have to go into the hospital, have the stress of all of the admission and that, and then have to either spend a few hours in the postpartum unit or even 24 hours. We're going to come see you the next day too, within 24 hours. So that part is really nice, is making sure everything's okay and knowing that someone's going to come see you very, very shortly to check in and make sure everything's okay. I think that some of the reasons recently people have been choosing home birth is because of the COVID crisis, for sure. People are wanting to stay out of the hospital, but that has been a theme that I've seen often, in the sense that a lot of clients just don't like the hospital in general. They think that that's a place where sick people go, and so they would just rather be in their own home because they're a healthy, low risk pregnant person, so it makes sense for them. I think in general, those are kind of the main reasons that people want to stay home. And we also know that just by planning a home birth, you reduce your rates of intervention, you reduce your rates of having a C-section, an epidural, all of those kinds of things. Why that happens, not really entirely sure, but just by planning a home birth, you have all of these great benefits, which is really cool.
That's really interesting. I actually didn't realize that. Yeah, I could spend all day speculating on why that would be. That's a really interesting piece. Do you find that when you're working with clients who are, maybe kind of on the fence, they're considering a home birth, they're not 100% sure if that's what they want, they're kind of weighing back and forth, do you find that there's maybe, just as you're talking it through with them, are there any kind of concerns that you might say are more specific to partners than the birthing person? I think it's also, to me, I always think the person who's giving birth probably does more worrying about it leading up to it, honestly. But then in the process of going through it, they're not always in that headspace to be kind of actively nervous and worried and micromanaging as they're moving through it. However, partners who are not having all of those hormonal cocktails and everything else that's going on, and are fully present in their heads and their brain, and maybe, you know, might have done some amount of worrying and concern, but are potentially doing more of that in the moment than the birthing person. You know, are you finding that there's any like questions or common questions or concerns that you get from partners that you're having to speak to as a midwife?
I think the hard thing for partners is that you're so out of control. And I think partners are often very used to having a lot of control. And you just kind of, you're sitting and watching things unfold. So that can be really, really hard. I think that newborn concerns are a big issue with partners. And what we do is we offer a 37-week home visit if you're planning a home delivery, at which point, if partners are really concerned, I actually bring all of my equipment out from the car and just lay it out on the floor. And when people actually see all of that, they kind of go, oh my gosh, I didn't realize you had all of this stuff. And it really eases a lot of fears. And I'll show them how it works, how you turn it on, you know, why I would use this particular set of equipment, and usually say it just sits in the corner and does nothing, but you know, if I need to use it, here's the reasons why. And I think that eases a lot of people's fears. But even, you know, if you're kind of on the fence about having a home birth, I'm also very easy for me to kind of say, well, let's do a home assessment in labor and we can stay here, see how you're coping. If you decide you want to stay here, great. If, you know, halfway through you decide you want to go into the hospital, also great. You're not locked into any one of your choices at any given point. Now with COVID, that's a little bit different these days, but under normal circumstances, that's what would happen.
Okay, so is it a little bit more, actually, that's a good, while we're in this moment or this period of time of COVID, are there additional considerations? Are your clients needing to kind of commit to a home birth a little bit sooner? How, you know, I mean, I would imagine a transfer of care when needed to the hospital is always going to be an option, but are there any additional things that clients need to be taking into consideration, or just anything around COVID that you could chat with us about?
Yeah, so my practice right now isn't offering home assessments in labor for people that are planning a hospital birth. Okay. So we're trying to stay out of people's homes as much as possible. Of course, people that are planning home birth, the screening questions apply. You know, fever, travel, has anyone in the house been sick? We're trying to minimize the support people around as well, just to kind of minimize our risk of being exposed to you know, whomever is around. And of course, we're also wearing tons and tons of personal protective equipment. So you'll see your midwives kind of looking like a Ghostbuster in a hazmat suit, but like a full gown, a face shield, our mask, all of those kinds of things we'll be wearing when we come into your house. Even for your home visit, we'll also be wearing those things. So home birth looks a little bit different these days, but I feel like the vibe is the same.
Okay, that's good to know. I mean, I know birth in general looks a little bit different. There's a lot more PPE being used. There's a lot more kind of protocols and questions and other considerations, whether at home or in hospital. But even just our doula support has been looking a little bit different depending on the client. And so the one thing, though, I am hearing, and I hope that you are too from your clients, is that they're still finding ways to kind of connect and have really positive birth experiences and really kind of still find that joy in birthing.
Yeah, I think we're still finding the same thing. People are having really good experiences despite kind of all of the other things that are happening around the hospital. I think in general, the great thing about midwives is that, you know, we close the door, it's our own space. So we're not having the hustle and bustle and the potential busyness that's happening on the floor really affect what's happening in our room. So I think that in general, the vibe of everything is still kind of staying the same, despite not really knowing what your midwife looks like.
Yeah, I know. It's we were saying before we went live, a lot of the world feels like, and maybe this is an experience unique to me, but I always found like, you know, you go to your dentist and you potentially see the same dental hygienist like over multiple visits, and then it's not till the third or fourth visit they take off their mask and you see their whole face and you realize, oh, like I was right or I was wrong about what I thought you looked like under that mask. And I think so much more of the world is just kind of existing like that these days. Like the difference, the juxtaposition between what we imagine when we just see people's eyes to seeing the rest of their face.
Yeah, we're definitely communicating a lot with our eyes during this time, for sure. Yeah. I make an effort to like really smile with my eyes.
Yeah, I know. We're all going to come out of this with lots of like crow's feet and stuff from all of the like squinty smiling we've been doing for however long COVID goes on for. But that's okay. I think that makes people just look like they were kind people. So we'll all just look a lot kinder in our old age as a result.
Yes, exactly.
I guess another question that I get sometimes from clients is wondering, you know, as we know, midwives are specialists in kind of low risk birth. And so there are a certain number of things that can risk somebody out of midwifery care in general. But are there things that exist where this person would still be able to keep midwifery care and they're not too high risk for midwifery care, but might risk them out of the option of a home birth? And are there things like that that could prevent someone from even being able to plan a potential home birth?
I mean, it's all about informed choice at the end of the day. So whatever your medical history is or your obstetric history, we're going to go through that in great detail. So let's say, for example, you have had a cesarean before and now you'd like to have a home birth. In general, we would say that the recommendation is that you have continuous fetal monitoring in your labor, which we can't provide at home. However, after a lengthy informed discussion, with your midwife, you two might come to a decision together that it might still be okay for you to have your baby at home, despite the recommendation of you being in the hospital. But those are kind of things that you would discuss individually with your midwife to kind of see what your level of comfort is, having your baby at home and what your midwife's level of comfort is too. There's lots of things to consider, including transport time to the hospital, kind of where the hospital is, what level hospital are they, how fast can they mount a cesarean if that was necessary, talking about those risks of uterine rupture. So those kinds of things are very specific that you would need to discuss with your midwife and kind of say, where do you feel would be the best place for me to give birth and why?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I had a question too that I was going to ask, but now I think I'm losing it. Oh yes, the kind of final question that I had for you, and then if there's anything else you want to share, of course, I'll open the floor to you. But was, some people have large homes and lots of space for a home birth, and other people live in small condos or apartments, maybe, don't have a bathtub, only have like a tiny shower and a small kitchen and not a ton of space. What kinds of space considerations or layout considerations are important for people when they're considering a home birth? And how do you kind of navigate some of those different or tighter quarters?
Yeah, the tiny spaces. Well, I mean, I've caught babies on like toilets in very small bathrooms and in very small showers and those kinds of places. But I still always had space to at least set up all my emergency equipment. So whether that's a table that you buy from Home Depot or wherever, and you just kind of place that in your bedroom, or that's a dresser. That's really the most important thing, is I need a space where I can set up all of that really important stuff. We need space for 2 midwives at every delivery. So as long as there's kind of enough room for you, your partner, and the 2 midwives to be around and kind of to access you kind of from all points, then that would be reasonable. But again, at that 37-week home visit, we'll kind of go over your space, survey the area, and say, this is where I'd like to set up my equipment. If you could clear that table off. Here would be a great place to have your baby because I can access you from this side and this side. And in case of emergency, why don't we clear this area so that, if extra people needed to come into the home, there was more room. But again, as long as there's kind of enough space for all of the equipment to be set up and within close reach, then I think it's reasonable, even in a a small apartment to have your home birth there.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, before moving to Hamilton, attended a number of births in Toronto where I used to live, and definitely have been at some tight quarter home births. And yeah, like I said, okay, well, the only space to put this tub is in the kitchen, or, maybe we're going to give birth to the baby in this hallway. It kind of goes to nowhere, and we can set it up here. And definitely, yeah, you can make do. And I do find one of the cool things about midwives is your flexibility. You will, rather than saying you must get up and deliver on this hospital bed, you will get yourselves into some pretty interesting positions to be able to safely catch a baby wherever they decide to come.
Yes, we have a good massage therapy plan for that reason.
Good. I was going to say, if you don't, that's definitely something to negotiate the next time. I'm sure you have definitely some tinges and some of that stuff as well that comes from some of those positions.
But yeah, again, we don't mind. It's really where you feel most comfortable, and we're very creative at catching babies in all different kinds of positions.
Is there anything else that you feel like you would want to share with the world about home birth, or questions that you get a lot that maybe I didn't ask you?
Actually, your questions were great. I don't really have anything in particular other than it's just home birth is just so fun for us. We love it, and we think it's a really important choice to offer to all pregnant people. And we know that it's safe here in Canada, and so if you're considering it at all, talk to your midwife about it, and hopefully they'll be able to give you a lot of good information.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. Speaking of good information, you gave us a lot of that today. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us. Yeah, it's always a pleasure to get to connect with other birth workers in the community and kind of share some of our knowledge and our bases with each other so that we can get some of this information out further. So thank you so much for taking the time to join us today.
That's great. Thank you.
All right. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you, everyone who joined us. And if you have any other questions, you can always reach out to us at Toronto Family Doulas, Hamilton Family Doulas, or Family Doulas of Ottawa. And, you in all of those areas, we have some really great midwifery practices who can also chat with you more about potentially planning your own home birth. So thank you.